Well, it's time for another episode of Formula Drift Insider, so strap on your Takata belts and let's get this thing going as we break down the last event of the Formula Drift Championship in the deep southeast corner of the country at Palm Beach International Raceway. Now, after Road Atlanta, I thought I had seen it all, but I'm always reminded to never, ever, ever, ever be surprised at a Formula Drift event. If it's possible, it will happen. And boy, did things happen at this most recent round. But first, let's talk a little bit about the judging and some of the criteria by setting some foundation. On this course, the judges had 9 course marker cones placed around the track that were 30 inches from the outside part of the painted line. Now, if a driver knocked any of these over, it would be considered a zero run, because it would have meant that a driver's rear of the car would have been more than 4 feet from the inside line of the course, which marked the offline area. Now, this is a very generous allowance from the judges, and it's part of a layered system that helps fans, judges, and spotters be better informed. First, we use our eyes to see what happened. Next is the various camera angles and replays. And finally, to make it absolutely clear and simple to understand, if any of these course markers are knocked over by a vehicle, it would be a zero. Okay, let's get to the battles. First up, we have a heated battle with the boys from Norway, Fredrik Aasbo and Kenny Moen. On run 1, Kenny comes out a bit too hot, goes wide, and hits the off-course markers, receiving a zero. The run would continue, but with Kenny's zero run, he needed to pull out all the stops. As both drivers transition into the second outer zone, on run 2, Kenny would push a bit hard, make contact with Fredrik Aasbo, and Kenny would go off course, giving Fredrik Aasbo the win. Fredrik Aasbo continues to be a spotlight in the series, as his battles have been some of the best we have seen all year. Next up, we pit Chris Forsberg versus Michael Essa. Now, this battle seemed pretty clear-cut based on the ground rules I just laid earlier on regarding the course markers. On the first run, Chris comes out with a sick lead run going very deep into outer zone number 2. Meanwhile, Michael has a tougher time staying with Chris on the transition. Essa eventually gets back on it, but Chris's lead run was exceptionally solid. Except one thing, he knocked over a course marker, giving him a zero. Now, make no mistake about it, Chris did not explode off the track and destroy a bunch of cones. He simply passed over the line, got ever so close to the course marker, and as he drove by, it was knocked over. Now, some people are saying that Chris did not deserve a zero because it's possible that his smoke knocked it over. Okay, well, even if that were true, what difference does that make? If Chris didn't knock over the cone, who did? Chris's vehicle is the cause of the cone being knocked over. How much more clear do you need to be? The cone is over 4 feet from the track line, and it was knocked over by Chris's car. It doesn't matter if it was a soft pat or if it was exploded. It's a zero by definition. And while a tough loss for Forsberg, Essa would move on to the final 4. Our next battle has Matt Field against Daigo Saito. On the first run, Daigo comes out strong, big angle on the first outer zone. Field was with Daigo out of the gate, but falls back ever so slightly on transition, and then locks in on a lower line as Daigo goes wide and drops a tire for a slight deduction. Saito goes slightly wide on the first inner clip, and Field dives in and drives door to door from the straight to the last inner clip. On Field's lead run, both guys are close on initiation, and then as they transition to the second zone, Daigo is right with Matt and both guys go off course. Now, at this point, it's important to note that Formula Drift judging has a huge emphasis on proximity from the chase car to the lead car. With that emphasis being established, the judges will scrutinize mistakes by the lead driver that affect the chase. And so if there is contact by the chase, or if both drivers go off course together, the judges need to decide if the lead car was at fault for causing it to be so, because it would not be fair to penalize the chase for doing his job, which is to follow the lead as a moving clipping point. And in the case of Field and Saito, this is exactly what happened. Saito was chasing Field, who went off course. Daigo, in chase ever so close doing his job, went off course as well. Field was given fault, and so we look at run number 1, in which Daigo had the advantage. So Daigo Saito gets the win. This was not a 0-0 as some assume, because that would require that the drivers would have gone off the course independently of each other, not together as dictated by the lead driver. And finally, even if this was deemed independent, and thus both drivers receiving a 0, Daigo still would have won because he had a slight advantage in run number 1. Now let's get to Frederick Osbo and Vaughn Gittin Jr. In the first run, Vaughn leads. He comes out and leaves the first outer zone a bit early. Frederick tries to adjust and has a less than snappy transition into the next outer zone, which both drivers fill pretty well, with Frederick needing just a touch more proximity to make it look dominating. He's there, but he's not outstandingly close. The rest of the run is a bit closer, and they cross the line, with Frederick seeming to give Vaughn a little love tap. Next run, Frederick leaves the line as the lights go off. Vaughn is a bit slow to react. Frederick starts to pull on Vaughn, and then Vaughn hits the brakes and stops for a restart. Now at this point, let's talk about what's been stated about the restart cone. We know it is only for the chase to initiate. It can be used by the chase if he feels he got punked off the line, got a bad start, or if he feels for any reason he's not in a good position to chase. It is his right to enact, and all he must do is stop before the restart cone. Never has it been stated that the chase driver must come to a complete stop and turn around in front of the cone, or it would be a 0 for that driver. You can tell Vaughn doesn't get a good start, and you can clearly see him braking way before the cone, indicating that he's using the restart cone. Either way, it was a valid restart by definition, and consistent with how it's been used before. Frederick was allowed to go back and get a new pair of tires, and we got back on the line. The boys were off, and Frederick has a really good lead run, but Vaughn is very close to him most of the course. And it's enough for Ryan Lantane and Brian Eggert to give him the win, with Andy Yen going one more time. I will say though that more specificity is better than less. And if Formula Drift is going to allow for a restart cone in the future, all contingencies should be examined and thoroughly explained to avoid controversy. Now, at this point in the competition, everyone has been flooded with emotions going up and down again, that we've neglected to realize that Michael Essa, a driver who has never seen an FD podium, now finds himself in the finals against Daigo Saito, who took home a win in the Final Four against Vaughn Gittin Jr., who crashed into Saito in the final turn and not only took himself out of competition, he almost took out Saito permanently, as the damage that Gittin caused was severe. Saito finally got to the line, and so he battled Essa into the finals. Saito's car may still have suffered from damage by Gittin, as time was running out for him to fix it, but Michael Essa was stellar. And as he crossed the finish line, everyone knew he was our winner at round number 3 at Palm Beach International Raceway. Congratulations to Michael Essa, it was very well deserved. All right, well that's it for this episode of Formula Drift Insider. On the next, oh, you didn't think we would actually not address the most controversial call of the weekend, did you? All right, let's talk about June Mang and Tony Angelo. This by far received the most amount of response, not only on site, but also online afterwards. First, we need to start with the run as we saw it live. Tony goes out with the lead, has a pretty good lead run. Most people would give Tony Angelo a slight advantage. Second run, June initiates. Angelo almost makes contact with him. He straightens, and now Angelo is on a shallow line. He comes in tight, almost hits June again, and straightens at inner clip number 1. And then Tony falls back, and as June lifts for inner clip number 2, Tony hits June, and the run is over. Now, as one of the announcers, what I like to do after a run is go over to the judges before they give their vote and say my opinion out loud to them, and give them an opportunity to confirm my opinion is the same as theirs, or if any of them want to add or say something different, then I can report it to the fans. As I went over to the judges, I said the following about the run. Tony decent lead, June not bad but not great, Angelo all over the place in the chase, makes contact before inner clip 2, and all 3 of the judges responded at the same time saying, oh no, June as the lead caused all that for Angelo in the chase. They said June had an abrupt stall on entry and on inner clip 1 and near inner clip 2, which caused Angelo to make contact with him. Now at this point, I knew right then and there that there was a disconnect. To have all 3 judges be in stark contrast and thinking the same thing was something that I have never seen before. In the past, there might be one judge that sees something slightly different, or one judge that might favor a tire drop over a weak line, but never have I had all three been in stark contrast to what I saw. And this made me realize something. It made me realize that this run showed a disconnect, at least between me at that point and the judges, on judging the lead driver. Now, once the results were confirmed and based on the overwhelming feedback and the negative response on this call from not only fans, but also people in our very organization, I have to say that even if the judges were right by criteria, and in their opinion, they were, and I can see that, it simply has to be wrong on the basis that the judges and the fans cannot be so far apart. This isn't what we need, and Formula Drift has to be strong enough to make rules that are easier to understand, as well as criteria, even if we have to soften our stance on proximity, because that is where most of this stems from. We've added layer upon layer upon layer of criteria over the past few years that gives drivers more information on what is okay versus what is not okay, like what constitutes a zero, or the 2 strikes rule. And the biggest thing, but also the hardest to judge and to understand for the fan, is what the lead car can or cannot get away with, since there is so much emphasis on proximity for the chase driver. With that being said, for the betterment of the sport, we can't have runs like this define the standard of a majority rules win run. It has to be simpler and easier to understand, and this is something we all ought to think about. Those that want more criteria need to think about what is too much criteria. And those that want none need to know that teams have to understand how to win. To be a judge should not require knowledge that cannot be accessed by the fan. Or how in the world do we expect them to know anything if the process of doing so requires page after page of criteria? Definitely something to think about. All right, well, now we're really done with this episode of Formula Drift Insider. Thank you for joining us, and as always, like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And of course, if you want to ask me any questions about the show or anything else, you can leave them right here. Till next time.